Did he say my name? Suddenly, I'm put on the spot. I felt like the spotlight had come on me. I looked at Rossley, who's a student of mine at the University of San Francisco. I said, Rossley, I haven't prepared anything. He said, inshallah, it'll be okay. You should see the look of worry on his face. But, okay. So I get up there, I'm unprepared. I give them this 5-minute, contorted summary of things as best as I can recall. I really hadn't absorbed it yet, the whole experience. And then I get done, and I step away from and then the master of ceremonies makes another supplication and prayer, and then recites a little bit more of the Qur'an, and then adjourns the meeting. And then I get down, I step off the stage, it's about 2 feet off the ground. I step off the stage, hit the ground, and every brother in the place, all 200 or something of them, converge on me. And I felt like it was Gandhi, converged on me. You ever see the movie Gandhi? The crowds all around him. That's the way it felt. People grabbing, touching. That's the way it was. They were touching my head. They were kissing my forehead. They were crying. Some of them were crying. Telling me how pure I was, how wonderful I was. I knew who I was. Not much different than I was the day before. I was freaking out, They were giving me that Islamic triple hug. I had never been hugged by a man in my life. Really. Not even my dad. We're Germans. Even my mom rarely hugged me. This is all about touchy-feely people. I was in San Francisco, for God's sake. Standing there like, what's going on? Is this the correct community? They were writing their names and addresses on pieces of paper and sticking them in my pocket. Every pocket was puffed. I looked like the scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. It took me 2 hours to get out of that room. The door was only 40 feet away. By the time I finally made it through the crowd and got over there, and I had like 30 rides offering me a ride all the way back to San Francisco. By the time I got over there, 2 hours had passed. Well, the interesting thing about it is I was not the only speaker that night. There was another convert who also presented his recent conversion story. But he got like 8 handshakes, got off the stage, was out of there in 3 minutes, and had to find a ride back to San Francisco. But the only difference I could see from me and that convert, because he was a graduate student at UC Berkeley, a fine institution, was he was black and I was white. And I was wondering, did I enter a community of races? What is going on? It was devastating. That wonderful experience I just had just was so utterly tainted by the fact that that brother was totally ignored. And I thought, well, I'll just ignore it. Maybe I'm reading into it something. And then, it would happen time and time again. I'd be standing in the mosque one day talking to an American brother who converted to Islam from an African-American heritage, and the brothers would come up and shake my hand and ignore him, or walk right out. One time in the masjid in Lawrence, Kansas, liberal environment, Rush Limbaugh said that, what do you call it? It's like a liberal oasis, and he meant it in a bad sense, in the middle of George Bush country. But I'm standing up giving the khutbah, and then I finally asked the brother, I told them we had a problem in this regard, and I said, I'll give you an example. How many of you know the American converts in our community? All the brothers seemed confident they did. So I said, raise your hand if you know Brother Jeffrey Lang. They all smiled. And how many of you know Brother Douglas? They laughed. Brother Eric? They laughed. How many know Brother Kareem? Who's Kareem? How many of you know Brother Nathan? Nathan? Kyle? How many of you know Brother Malik? Malik? Paul? They didn't know. There were 4 African-American brothers, students at the university who attended every Friday prayer practically since they were there. The American converts, to be honest with you, their attendance was much more sporadic, the white American converts, the Caucasians. Yet they all knew them, but didn't know them. Now I believe it's not what I initially thought it was, deep-seated racial violent hatred. Because some of the brothers who came up and shook my hand, they were darker than the African American brothers. It wasn't that. It was something, I don't know, an experience of colonialism or the fact that Caucasian Europe is always seen as a perennial nemesis, and when one of these comes over, they think of it as some sort of victory or things like that. But the point of it is, the reaction among us who grew up here is visceral. Again, we went through that kind of racism. When I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, we were warring in the streets. And many of us who came to Islam came because we sensed that something was better. We read the Qur'an. We go to our community and think, here we go again? Because even if it isn't really based, somebody, every time I bring this up, comes up to me and says, it's not racism, it's just that you see, because when a white person gets racist, it's rare, and so we think that, they can do much to bring, it doesn't matter. Maybe, who cares what the reason is, or the rationale? The point is that it's destructive, and it's going to eventually lead to the kind of racial antagonism and animosity that we lived through and are still living through. The scars are still fresh, they're still bleeding in the United States of America. I hope it's not a problem here in Canada. But it's just an example. But the other kinds of ethnocentrism and racial stuff is, racism, or not racism, but ethnocentrism is a big, big problem for our converts, for our homegrown Muslims. Okay, so if you'll allow me, I'm going to talk, unless you're exhausted,